My friends, with us tonight is the face of the Holocaust, the very living embodiment of the martyred 6 million, a true legend in his own lifetime, the pride and radiance of the Jewish people, the winner of the Nobel Prize for Peace, and the voice that dared thunder and challenge the heavens itself in the face of the world's greatest crime, the one and the only Elie Wiesel. It was for this reason that we wanted to organize this event so badly, as I introduced the ambassador, which is that about 6 or 7 weeks ago, President Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority spoke to this very hall, to an audience that gave him an ovation. I'm an American citizen. I'm Jewish. I love Israel. I see it as a majestic, righteous, and just democracy that upholds human freedoms, that upholds human rights, that stands up for the dignity of every woman, that allows, not just allows, but gay men have the largest gay pride parade anywhere in the Middle East, which isn't saying much, although it's one of the biggest parades anywhere in the world, because a gay man can be an equal citizen, because he's an equal child of God like every other person. And I'm someone who believes in the first chapter of Genesis, that every human being is created in the image of God, that every Palestinian child is the equal of a Jewish child. But if our people are maligned, we must respond. When President Mahmoud Abbas left the stage and went 2 days later before the United Nations General Assembly and fraudulently and falsely accused Israel of a genocide against the Palestinians, repeating the oldest canard in the book, that the Jews are guilty of a blood libel, this time on a collective mass scale, against every available shred of evidence to the contrary, because Israel gives more human rights to Arab citizens than any country in the Middle East, it requires a response. I have no problem with people criticizing Israel. God knows Israel's fallible, human, and makes tons of mistakes. But I am absolutely opposed to defamation of the Jewish people, to character assassination and slander. And when I discussed this with Professor Wiesel, and he said to me, Shmuley, don't worry, the people will not necessarily believe it's true. I reminded him, and I've never taught Elie Wiesel anything in my entire life. I reminded him that when they said we killed God, the world believed them. When they said that we drank the blood of Christian children in our matzahs, nobody thought, so absurd, it's impossible, and the world believed it. When they said that we poisoned the wells of Europe and created the bubonic plague, the world believed it. So I have to respond, because I've discovered that anything said about our people somehow is believable. The Jewish people are not perfect, but God Almighty, if we're not the way we are portrayed, and we will respond. My friends, ladies and gentlemen, what an honor for this organization, and for me personally, and Professor Wiesel, to recognize and welcome a phenomenal light of the American people to the world, Ambassador Samantha Power.
After what Elie Wiesel endured in the subsequent months in Auschwitz and then Buchenwald, after the death of his father in the waning days of the war in January 1945, he would have been more than justified to sit in silence for a lifetime. This orphan teenager could have mourned privately for his parents, for his little sister, for his grandfather. He could have put the past in the past somehow. But instead of silence, as you all know well, he chose to invest in words. After his liberation and his studies in France, he decided to record what he had endured. There could be nothing more painful than reliving what it was like to be in Auschwitz. But though he knew uniquely that it was structurally impossible for words to capture his experience, he bent his will and his words to this task. As he put it once in writing, only those who experienced Auschwitz know what it was. Others will never know. But would they at least understand? Bend his pen and bend those words to capture history and to capture the moral choices that each of us have. Now, the work that Elie Wiesel has started, needless to say, is unfinished. We will always have to be guarding against threats, and we have to infuse his life's work, this essential work, with the spirit of new generations. More than 10 million people now have read Night. Millions more than the 6 million Jews who were exterminated in the Holocaust. Millions more will read it. Its impact is immeasurable. how horrific it is that it was the Holocaust, it took the Holocaust to give birth to this effort, yet how amazing it is to know that my children and my children's children, and Ellie, your grandchildren, will one day open the pages of night and be forced to ask themselves the ever-important questions. What would I have done? And what will I now do? Thank you, Ellie, for all you have done and all you continue to do. Thank you for being such a voice and such a friend to me and so many people around the world who have never had the chance to say thank you. So thank you.
Began when? I don't know, Jacob and Esau, or later on, when? How does one produce such a desire to hurt other people only because of their faith, or their religion, or whoever, what, why? What is the reason of all that? What good can it do? It comes to anti-Semitism, which I believe to be the oldest group hatred in recorded history. The oldest. We talk anti-Semitism, which I believe to be the oldest mass inspiring hatred in history. Anti-Semitism is today as strong as it has been 1,800 years ago, 1,600 years ago, 2,000 years ago. Things change, regimes change, ideologies change, anti-Semitism remains. You want to tell me today there are no more anti-Semites in the world? Of course there are.
Of criticism that says that Israel is genocidal, which I think is false as a statement of fact and false as a statement of law, has a political power in part because Israel is connected in the minds of many, many people to the European attempt, much too late, to atone in some way for the genocide of the Shoah. And that means, although that's not the rationale that the early Zionists had for creating the State of Israel, since they were interested in creating the State of Israel long before the Holocaust, that means that the rationale for Israel is bound up in many people's minds with the phenomenon of genocide. And in politics, one of the most skillful rhetorical things you can do is take an argument in favor of your opponent and flip it on its head and try to use it against him. And therefore, by saying to Israel, you're committing genocide, the rhetorical goal is to delegitimate not simply Israel's actions, for example, in Gaza, but to delegitimate the justifiability of the state at all in the first place. To say, well, some people think you deserve your state because of a genocide, but if you've committed a genocide, or you're in the process of committing one, then you never had a right to the state in the first place. And that's a very skillful piece of political rhetoric because it pivots off of the initial presumption that part of Israel's reason for existing or right to exist is connected to the genocide. And I think that's one of the reasons for its rhetorical effect. And the thing about rhetoric is nobody has to believe it the first time it's said, or the second, or the third. But eventually, a rhetorical point that's repeated can begin to take on weight.